It is kind of a sad, dreary, rainy day today. It's super cold outside, and so I thought today would be a great day to make something really comfy and cozy for our tummies. So I am going to make some homemade marinara sauce and some homemade meatballs today, and we're going to have a really hearty bowl of spaghetti and meatballs for dinner tonight. So I thought I would bring you guys along with me to show you how I make my homemade marinara sauce and my meatballs. So this recipe is pretty forgiving. I don't even know that I would call it a recipe per se, because I do it different every time. So I always start with cans of crushed tomatoes. I picked these up from Dollar Tree a little while ago, several months ago. I don't know if they still carry them or not. I don't have any onions this time, so normally I would like sweat down some onions in it, but I'm just going to use onion flakes because I don't have that and I don't want to have to go to the store just to get onion. I'm going to use some Italian seasoning because I don't have any fresh herbs right now from my garden to put in it. I need to refill this jar. I'm going to need more than this, but I am going to just put some dried herbs in it this time because that's what I have. And then I have minced garlic just in a container like this. This is how I prefer to buy it. And so this is the garlic that I'm going to use. The only other thing that is going to be really important is some good olive oil and some good Parmesan cheese. So this is actually just going to get chunked up and put in there, and it's going to cook all day in the sauce. It's not going to completely melt. There are going to be chunks at the end of the day, but it's going to make a big difference on the flavor. So don't skimp on the cheese in it. It does make a difference. Okay, so I am just going to turn my heat on my pan pretty high to start out with, and then I'm going to put a couple of tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, a good olive oil in there. Again, this recipe doesn't have a lot of ingredients, so if you can use a good version of whatever those ingredients are, I highly suggest it. It's a really good place to do that. So once my oil gets pretty warm, I'm going to take my garlic, and I'm going to put a decent amount of garlic in there. We really like a garlicky sauce. Make sure and move that around. Then I also like to put my spices in there and kind of toast those a little bit. Then as soon as you can start to smell that, you're going to pour in your tomatoes. I'm going to give that a stir and add in my dried minced onion as well. And then make sure and salt it. The Parmesan cheese is going to add a little bit of salt, but those tomatoes are going to drink that salt right up. And then we like to have just a little bit of kick, so I'm going to add maybe 1/4 teaspoon of red pepper flakes to it. And then here is when I'm going to turn my heat down. I'm going to turn it down pretty low, because this is going to cook and simmer for hours and make my house smell amazing. Okay, and then the last thing that I am going to add in is just a big chunk of that Parmesan cheese, just right in the middle. And as that sauce cooks, it's gonna melt into that sauce. It's gonna help flavor it, and it is going to give it an amazing, amazing flavor. So I am going to cover this and let it sit, and I will come back and stir it just every maybe half hour just to make sure that nothing is burning on the bottom. But this is going to sit and rest until we are ready to eat dinner tonight. So my sauce has been cooking for a few hours now, and my house smells so good, and all I want to do is just dig right in. So I am going to get started on making some meatballs to go with our dinner tonight. So I'm starting out with 2 pounds of ground beef. This is such a great recipe to use, like a cheaper kind of meat, because it's just using ground meat. So I have 2 pounds of ground meat and 2 eggs. And then to that, I'm gonna add 1 cup of whole milk and a 1/2 cup of breadcrumbs. That's the garlic, that could have been really bad. I'm just using plain breadcrumbs here. And then we're gonna add some seasoning to this. So I'm gonna do a teaspoon of garlic powder, maybe even a little over a teaspoon. I'm gonna do a teaspoon of onion powder. When I haven't had onion powder, but I did have onions in the past, I have sauteed onions, about a 1/2 of an onion, and put that in there, and it gives a really nice texture as well. A teaspoon of onion powder, a teaspoon of salt, 1/2 teaspoon of pepper. And then the last ingredient is going to be Parmesan cheese. So the first part of that Parmesan cheese I cut off and put in the sauce, and then the rest of it I am going to put in my meatballs. Probably not even all of it, about that much. 2 good handfuls, maybe about a 1/2 cup. And then I'm gonna go in with my hands and just mix all of this together. Okay, just 1 or 2 minutes of mixing with my hands and we are good to go. Okay, so I have my meatball mixture all mixed together and my hands are nice and washed now. So I am just going to use this scoop, it's about 2 tablespoons is my guess. And I am going to scoop out my meatball mixture onto my sheet pan. I have my oven preheated to 450 degrees. I have made meatballs before where you form them and then you have to brown them off in a pan and then finish either cooking them in the sauce or in the oven. And I have found that it's too much work for me. So I really love this kind of way of doing it, I guess. I am just going to brown them and cook them in the oven all at the same time. So I am going to get these scooped out. I am not going to be super worried about like separating them. They're not going to get any bigger in the oven or anything like that, like cookies normally would. But I'm just going to get them completely covering this sheet pan, and I may end up needing another sheet pan as well. This 2 pounds of hamburger meat, you will see, is going to make a ton of meatballs. So anytime I make this, I always make sure and make it at a time when I'm either making a meal, not just for us, but for somebody else as well. Or I will, whatever we have left over, stick in the freezer. This is a really great like make ahead freezer thing that you could just reheat the meatballs in a warmed sauce if you wanted to, or reheat them in the oven. I have definitely done all of those things, but this is a really, really great option for something that you can already have pre-made in your freezer. So anything that we have left over, that's what I'm going to do with that today. Okay, so I have 1 sheet tray completely full. You can see how much I have left. So I'm gonna have another sheet tray, probably at least halfway full. And my family will usually eat maybe 3, 4, 5 of these, depending upon who it is in our family, for 1 serving. So I am getting a lot of servings of protein out of just those 2 pounds of ground beef and those 2 eggs. So this stuff goes really, really far. So I'm gonna stick this in my oven for about 20 minutes or just until they are nice and browned and smell delicious. Okay, my meatballs are done. You can see that there is like a decent amount of brown bits on there. That is what you want. So I'm gonna pull these off of here and just drain them on some paper towels on a plate, and then they will be ready for dinner. All right, my sauce has been cooking for hours and it smells amazing. And it just needs one last thing, and that is to be kind of blended up. If you like a chunky sauce, then you can absolutely stop here. It is pretty chunky for our taste though, so I am going to go ahead and blend it up. I did go ahead and taste it as I was going. I added a little bit more salt, a little bit of black pepper, and then I did add about a half a teaspoon of granulated sugar to it. It is not a sweet sauce by any means, but I did want it to kind of cut that acidity. So it doesn't taste sweet, it just needs a little bit of sugar to cut that acidity, which a half a teaspoon of sugar for this much sauce is, I don't think is that big of a deal. If you want though, you can leave that out entirely. It's just gonna taste a lot more acidic. So I am going to use my stick blender. I'm gonna blend this up, and then we are going to get our noodles going while this just heats through, finishes cooking, and then we will have our dinner. If you're wondering about the Parmesan cheese, it did end up just pretty much completely melting in there. There are like little bits of it that I can see, but that is okay with me. That is going to be a really, really delicious bite. All right, I gave it one more taste, and I think it needs a little bit more salt. So I'm going to add just another dash of salt to it. And then I was thinking, since it is so cold today, I think I want to make this a little bit more decadent. So I am going to add about anywhere from half a cup to a full cup of heavy whipping cream to this. You could also add cream cheese if you have that, and that is going to add just a layer of decadence to it as well. That looks super yummy. So now we have like a creamy marinara sauce that's cheesy from that Parmesan that was in there. This is going to make a really, really soul-warming meal for our dinner tonight. So I'm gonna turn this heat on low just to let it completely simmer through and get really warm and tasty. You can see the texture of that now. It's not super chunky. It's just really, really delicious. And once our pasta is done, we will have dinner.